So I'm really excited to welcome today Dr. Martha Deiros Collado, clinical psychologist with over 20 years of experience working with children and families, mother of two, and also author of this brilliant book, which I finished reading very recently, The Smartphone Solution: When and How to Give Your Child a Phone. Welcome, Dr. Martha.
Thank you for having me.
It's really good to have you. And I think the first question is really just asking you why you felt compelled to write this book. Why this book? Why now?
Yeah, great question. Why this book? Why now? Um, I wasn't sure that I was the right person to write this book, to be honest. But the
Hmm.
reason why was one, I'm a mother of two. I think the topic of smartphones is, the biggest challenge for my generation of parents. But I think
Yeah.
as a mother, I care deeply about this topic as well. I'd actually been talking about smartphones and social media on my platform for a while with like no real kind of engagement or interest. And obviously, there was a big book that came out, or there was a book that
Mm.
came out, and everybody talked about it. And
Yes.
then off the back of that, there's been like TV shows and all sorts of things. And I think I was really struck by the fear
Hmm.
that, like, parents are being left with. I was really struck by how much parents want to get this right. I was really aware that some of the science was getting lost because it became such an emotive and polarizing topic. And I guess as a clinical psychologist who's also now online, it's one of the topics I get asked about the most from parents.
Hmm.
Screen time, smartphones, when, how, what do I do? Do we go totally like, do I get rid of my smartphone? Do we
Yeah.
all just lose everything? Do we go back to, I don't know, do we go back to CDs and retro cameras? And, like,
Yeah.
do I need to go off and live in a field, basically? Like,
Yes.
I'm exaggerating, but also I'm not. I
Yeah.
have lots of parents going, well, maybe I shouldn't have one because, they're toxic, they're dangerous.
Hmm.
And I think because of that, and because when I spoke, people responded positively,
Yeah.
I think what we need to bring in is the nuance and bring in the
Hmm.
science in a way that people can understand. I don't believe in fear being, well, because fear is not a helpful position to be in
Mm.
as a parent at any point. Fear is a helpful feeling because it's protecting us, but it's not a good feeling when you're trying to make a good decision or a long-term healthy decision. I believe in parents having good information so they can make informed choices, and I
Hmm.
don't think that's what the narrative was at that point when I started writing this book. I also, in all honesty, got approached to write the book, and I thought,
Hmm.
okay, well, I've got this opportunity, maybe I should try.
Yeah.
um so those are, I mean, there's lots of reasons.
Hmm.
Mainly me being a mum. Secondly, really wanting to offer information that makes sense, that is science-based, but doesn't bring up fear, because I'm very
Yeah.
much anti that.
Yeah. And do you know what? That's why I picked up your book on the bookshelf, because it kind of spoke to me as a parent. So I've got two boys, they are 8 and 10, and so phones and digital technology is massively on mine and my wife's radar right now. Um, and I'd also read Professor Pete Etchell's book Unlocked, and I've interviewed him recently. He's a big fan of your book. It was on his shelf
Oh.
when I interviewed him. Um, and that was what appealed to me about both of you, actually. Your book, The Smartphone Solution, Unlocked by Pete Etchells, they're both very down to earth, practical, measured books, and you delve into the science and the nuance. And so just on that point, I asked Pete the same question. The evidence around children's use of digital technology and their mental health and well-being, you make the point in your book, it's not as clear cut as many people would have you believe, because there are some very prominent people saying it is completely clear social media is driving the mental health crisis in teenagers. Can you just shed a little bit more light on it? We don't have to delve into like all of the studies, but just, what is the picture?
It's complex, and I think some
Mm.
people don't like the complexity of it, and I get it. I think it's simpler to say it's social media, let's get rid of it. I think what we know from science, I guess I'll start from the beginning. A couple of things. I think people don't understand mental health.
Hmm.
Fact. I think people misunderstand what it is. I think people think mental health is like a toothache, for example. So if you have a toothache, you go to the dentist, you sort out your teeth. Mental health isn't one thing.
Hmm.
It's more like going for a full physical health check, right? Mental health,
Hmm.
the ingredients that create positive mental health in all of us are multifaceted. Some of them are biological, some of them are social, some of them are like environmental. Some of them are the foods that you eat or you don't eat. Some of them are the movement you do or you don't do. All those things are factors and they impact on your mental health, right? There's never
Yeah.
one thing. And I think that when you break it down already makes people go a bit bamboozled, because I think for some reason, I think mental health always feels quite vague as opposed to physical health, which, we can see and it's very
Yeah.
kind of concrete. So that would be my first thing. People don't understand mental health. Secondly, we cannot attribute the decline in mental health from young people by one thing. Okay, firstly, for that one reason alone, it's totally illogical. Secondly, because a lot of the kind of science that some people talk about, this proves that, it hasn't been done. So
Mm.
we don't know. I think what we do know is that it is a contributing factor. I think what we do know is that some young people are vulnerable from the
Yeah.
get-go to anxiety, to depression, to social comparison, to all those things. And social media adds to it. So I see social media as a risk factor because I
Hmm.
think that's what it is. But again, I don't think lots of people understand risk. And I think a risk factor doesn't mean it's causal. It doesn't mean it's definitely going to happen. But to me, both as a parent and a clinical psychologist, the risk that a child on social media will see content that is not age appropriate is very high. Will see
Hmm.
content that is harmful is very high. Like we've got stats and data around it. Even like
Yeah.
within 6 minutes of logging onto certain social media apps, children will see content that I don't want to see as an adult, but they will
Yeah.
see it. Like they get targeted. So we know that the algorithms are targeting vulnerability. They're not targeting interest. They're not trying to open up social spaces. They're targeting you to stay on it. And yeah, the more vulnerable you are, then the harder
Mm.
they go for you. And so
Yeah.
young people are vulnerable. We need to understand that. And again, developmentally, the other thing that I think gets misunderstood is that teenagers are more at risk in
Hmm.
general for anxiety, for depression, for mental health problems, because it is a developmental phase of like very rapid, kind of incredible changes physically, psychologically, socially. Adolescence has always been a risk factor for mental
Mm.
health problems. So we don't want to add more, is the way I think of it. I think of it as like, imagine you've got a little jug and you can add liquids into it, that top it up. You don't want that jug to overspill when you're thinking about mental health, especially for teenagers. Some of it will
Yeah.
be friendships. You can't change that. That's going to happen. Some of it will be their body changing hormones. It's going to increase that risk. You can't change that, right? You can
Mm.
buffer it, support them. You can't change that. But one of those add-ons is social media.
Yeah.
And social media didn't exist when I was a teenager. I'm very aware that if it had, I think it would have been really bad for me because I know what
Mm.
I was like as a teenager. I remember myself. And I was in a spiral of hormones and, which is, I think, quite typical for young girls.
Yeah.
Um, I think social media would have been really bad for me given my social network of
Hmm.
peers and,
Yeah.
the kind of peer group I had. So I'm glad it wasn't there. And so for me, social media was never made for children in the first
Yeah.
place. They really shouldn't be on it. And and we shouldn't be seeing it as like the devil that is like, causing a mental health crisis on all our young people, because I don't believe that that's true either. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yes, it does. And this is where, you know, a lot of the evidence that say some experts are using to prove that social media is the driving force behind children's mental health difficulties. A criticism of it is it's mostly correlational. So you can see, like, for example, let's say teenagers with depression are more likely to be spend more time online. And so you could use that to prove, well, look, it's really clear the more you use social media, the greater the risk of your depression. But then the flip side of that is actually, if you are depressed, you are more likely to spend more time online because you might be withdrawing from kind of socializing with friends and family and just going into your little online world in order to cope, in order to, avoid distressing emotions, etc., etc. So it's way more complex than some people kind of make out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't know which one came first. It's like the
No.
chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
Um, it's really, really difficult. And I think, we don't have that. There is some really great research happening right now, longitudinal, like across years, happening right
Yeah.
now in the UK, looking at teenage mental health. But I think one of the best studies that we have on it kind of shows that I add it in my book, and I might not relate it completely, but
Hmm.
I know I put this one in my book because I find it really interesting that actually one of the biggest distresses for young people isn't like going on social media versus not going on social media. It was wearing glasses. And I know you're wearing glasses right now, but
Yeah.
I wear
Okay.
glasses too
Yeah.
sometimes. And I find it really interesting because it's about identity,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And they did this study looking at what point does like distress escalate in young people. And actually one of the
Mm.
groups that has the most anxiety, doesn't matter if they're on social media or not, it's teenagers who wear glasses.
Wow. Interesting.
I know there is still like a
Yeah.
stigma around wearing glasses, which I think are really cool. Like I have
Yeah.
so many pairs just to go in my outfits. But
Yeah.
and I find that really fascinating. But I think if you talk about this with somebody who has already been sold the idea that social media is, you know, the biggest contributor to young people's mental health,
Mm.
they will just find a way around not listening to all of this. And
Yeah.
for me, the reason is that people care about young people's mental health. I think,
Hmm.
I always try and see the positive side of it. I think lots of people care about children and young people. That's a strong message I'm hearing right now. And that is so important
Mm.
because I don't think we've cared about children and young people in previous generations like we do now. And so
Yeah.
for me, that's beautiful. But two, I think it's simple.
Mm.
It's like a really simple solution. I'm concerned about the day where, if social media goes away, mental health doesn't improve, then what? What do we do then? Because it's more
Yeah.
complex.
Yeah. And I think that is my concern as well. So thinking about banning social media for under 16. So they're doing it in Australia and they're currently, I think, measuring the impact of that. And we're also talking about doing it here in the UK. And my biggest concern with that is, okay, let's say 12 months, 18 months down the line, it's an effective ban, okay? But there hasn't been any difference in children's levels of mental illness. Then what? Then it's what then? It's and I think that's going to happen. I don't think there's going to be a dramatic change. This is just my personal opinion in levels of anxiety and depression among teenagers if there's a ban on social media for under 16s because it's way more complex than just one single thing.
I mean, I think, at the crux of this conversation, and this is challenging, but,
Mm.
at the core of it is the fact that young people, particularly parents and young people, have been let down by society for years. And I think we are reaching, a kind of critical point with it. Mental health services have been defunded and broken down in the UK. We have less and less services for things like eating disorders, young people's mental health. Loads of child centres just like disappeared,
Hmm.
where like parents would go in the early years with their kids and get support and, build a community. Um, and I think at the core of this is we are putting a lot of our effort and time and conversations around smartphones and social media, and I'm not saying we don't need to talk about that. Two things can be true. We do need to talk about that. And we should be thinking about what helps children and younger people not go online. What would help parents not have to give kids a screen as entertainment continuously? Because to me, there is this constant, I need to keep my kid quiet. I need to keep my kid entertained. I think if we supported parents from the get-go as a society in a way that meant kids don't have to do that, to be entertained, kept quiet, busy, parents wouldn't rely on that as like the strategy. And now we wouldn't be in this place where there's 8-year-olds on social media, which I am never going to agree with, because I just don't think it's right. I don't think it's right. And it's, my reasons are layered for it, but it's not okay. They shouldn't be on there. But I also find it very difficult to blame the parents who are trying to do their best. And they're like, but there is nothing else. Where am I going to get the resources, the support, and I think as a society, we're failing parents and we're failing kids. And I think this is a wake-up call for that. And my worry all the time is that it all just gets kind of stuck on social media, and we're not having the bigger conversations about how do we make streets safer for kids to play in, and like the playgrounds, and how do we support parents, or make sure that their contribution to our society is valued. Why is childcare so expensive? So it's so expensive. I mean, I'm a working parent, as is my husband, and we really struggle with childcare costs. We don't have family anywhere near us. We have no other support. And it's so expensive. And I say it all the time, we can just about afford it. What about everybody else who can't? How are they managing this? And I think that's, for me, this is a much bigger conversation, and nobody's having it yet. But I think if the ban happens, two things are true for me. There's a difference between effectiveness and impact. I agree with you. I'm not sure it's going to be very effective. I think that, there's already lots of kind of noise about Australia not being very effective. Okay. So I think we should be learning from that, but maybe we won't. Maybe sometimes we need to learn from our own mistakes. So, I'm not anti the ban per se. I just think it's not a very effective thing. What I do think is it might have an important social impact on adults and our whole society, understanding that smartphones and social media were not created for children. So let's not give that to them.
Yeah, and that's a very strong message in your book. It's one you keep coming back to, that smartphones are not for children, or they're not been designed for children. Social media was not designed with children's mental health and well-being in mind. And one of the things that I've found useful, there's so many kind of useful, you give a lot of frameworks for parents to use, whether it's kind of things to say to their children, whether it's conversation kind of starters, which I find really kind of useful and practical. And one of the things you say in the book is something we can be saying to our children is you won't be getting a phone until you're 13, 14, whatever age we decide as a family. Why did you think that was an important boundary, to start having those conversations with kids and kind of drip feeding that message? Why is that important?
I think it's really important. So, children do well with boundaries, and boundaries at the end of the day is laying out your expectations. Okay, these are the expectations for our house or for the rules or whatever. And, we might say to children, well, you can't drink alcohol until your body is fully formed, because actually your body can't break down the alcohol, so it's toxic for you, for example. Or we might say, which I have because my daughter's like, when do we learn to drive? And I'm like, well, you won't learn to drive until you're about 17, because that's when it happens in this country. That's when you can start to learn how to drive and get your driver's license, and and you need to be an adult, you need to be old enough, because it's a responsibility to be safe on the road. You can really hurt somebody, is what I say, and you can get hurt as well. That's why we have rules, and we have to follow them, and we need to be an adult. I also tell my daughter the reason you can't drive until that age is because kids are very impulsive. And I'm not saying 17-year-olds are not, but I'm like, kids are very impulsive, is what I say to her. You know, you want to do what you want to do. So if you're behind the steering wheel, you might be like, "Ooh, this is fun." And actually, when you're an adult, you start to realize, oh, it's got a consequence. So I can't do that. I need to slow down. Also gives you time to like practice things. So we have these conversations about other things.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that about TV, screens, phones? I really think like we should. Like, just because they're part of our world doesn't mean that they should be accessed by kids at all times. And I feel like this is what big tech companies have done, because they've, you know, they did not create it for kids in the first place, but now there's all these kids apps, and because they've realized there's a market for it. I mean, it's a business. We need to be really sitting in our truth here. Smartphones, social media, it's a business. It makes some people very, very, very rich, but probably not you and me. Like,
Yeah.
right? And definitely not our kids, but they are taking data and they are extracting what they can from children to make themselves richer. So we need to be aware of that, because that's what it is. It's a money generating business. It is not social. I know that's how it's framed, great marketing, but it's not that. It's not that. So for me, the more you lay out that expectation, the better it is for kids, because then they're not like, can I have a smartphone? My friend has can I have a smartphone? They might start to ask, which my daughter does, a different question, which is, Mummy, how come that little boy's got a smartphone?
Yeah.
Because he's not 14, 15, 16, whatever age you're happy to, you know, you stick in your house. And I'm very clear about not saying dictating an age, because I think everybody's different. And I know there might be reasons why your child has a smartphone, and I think they could have a smartphone and you could still make it very, very safe. Like, they only have it when they go out, you know, when they come home, you put it away, because why are you carrying your smartphone around your house? I mean, really, we shouldn't be doing that either.
Yeah.
Why are we doing it? There's no reason. But my daughter asks that question, which she's asked because she sees it. That little boy's not old enough. Why has he got a smartphone? And that's a great question. So then we have a conversation about it. That is not the same as, when will I have a smartphone, Mummy? Can I have a smartphone? So for me, it's about breaking away from those battles with your kid.
Yeah.
And opening up the conversation about the reasons why children shouldn't have smartphones in their little hands.
Yeah. And I found, even just like reading that kind of sentence in your book about you won't be getting a smartphone until you're, like, I've started to say it with my 10-year-old, and he hasn't, a couple of times he's mentioned about a phone, when will I get one? But even that now is just a useful kind of signpost to him, an expectation that it's getting closer and closer. He's going to be 11 this year, but don't keep asking about it, because and like you say in the book, we can have a conversation about why and when and how we're going to do this. But I just find it useful, because as a parent, as I'm sure you know this full well, suddenly you look at your kids and they're not babies anymore, and they're not toddlers, and suddenly it's like, wow, our 10-year-old just looks so grown up all of a sudden. And so having that phrase, you won't be getting a smartphone until you're X, it just means you as a parent are also not taken by surprise. Like, suddenly it's like, oh God, they're 12 or they're year 6, and suddenly it's on our doorstep right now. You can start those conversations really quite early on and just signpost it, which I find really useful.
I think also it's for you.
Yeah.
I want to give parents confidence in their own authority as parents, because I say this all the time, but you have the authority as a parent to make the decision that's right for you and your family. You alone, not your neighbor, your kid's friend, whatever, you. So if you're like, actually, no, I'm not going to do this, then the practice of you saying it like you're doing in your house, you know, you won't be getting a smartphone until you're whatever age, is really helpful, because over time, that will grow your confidence. So then when somebody else gives their kid a smartphone, you're less likely to like waver, because you've been like, you know, you've been making yourself accountable to, this is the rule, because I've been saying it all the time, and you don't have to backtrack from it. That you can hold firm. you can change your mind. As parents, I do think you can always change your mind. But maybe you don't change your mind about that. Maybe you change your mind about your child having a mobile phone, which is not the same as like a mini computer in your pocket, which is what a
Yeah.
smartphone is, right?
Mm.
I mean, it's got so much technology. I'm not even sure everybody should have one, is my
Mm.
thought. You know, what do we use it for? We need to be
Yeah.
like, I feel like the critical thinking around technology is something that we've all missed because it's happened so fast. It's kind of been integrated into our lives and we've not thought about it. And
Yeah.
maybe just taking pause to think about how we use it, when it's useful, when it's not, is a really great thing, which I do hopefully talk about in my book as well enough because I feel like it's us and our children and it's not just our kids that shouldn't, you know, laying that expectation on them is one thing, but then we need to role model to them what
Yeah.
healthy use of it looks like.
Yeah, and I was going to ask that next actually about the importance of role modeling because when I finished reading your book, I was regularly talking to my wife about interesting bits, and she said to me, "I really want to read that after you." Um, is It's made me reflect a lot about how I use my phone, and the same with my wife. I think one of the challenges for us is my wife works in kind of marketing and she works for a charity and she is in control of their social media. So she, as part of her job, even when she's at home, has to check the social media feed, respond to anyone that's comment, that kind of stuff. And the same with me. Like I have my email on my phone, I have social media accounts. And so like us having clearly defined boundaries about when we're working, say at like a desk with a laptop and when we're not, is really blurred. But you have some really practical ideas, particularly in the family phone pledge, which we'll get to later. But like about phone-free zones, about where we physically place our phone, like I don't need it in my pocket. The interesting thing is, Martha, if I was to stand up now, you would see a clearly defined line. They're quite old jeans, but it's basically the shape of my phone. And I feel quite depressed that the left-hand side is completely warm because that's where my phone goes. And yeah, your book has made me think, why do I just carry that with me everywhere, even in this house? Like, can't I just leave it somewhere and then check it when I need to? Um, so yeah, why is role modeling such an important part of this jigsaw?
I mean, our children learn more by what we do than what we say to them, for sure,
Mm,
especially as they start to get older, right? So many kids will be like, "What, you don't want me on my screen, but you're on your phone all the time." Like,
mm,
I mean, that's a constant thing I hear from parents. Oh no, how do I teach my child to not spend so long on a screen when then they say that to me? And I'm like, you talk about it.
yeah,
Like, the solution isn't, well, you do as I say, not as I do, right? I think instead of that, it's let's have a conversation,
mm,
which then will lead into like for me the family phone pledge, which is not just about phones, it's about screen time, it's about how do you want to embed technology in your home, which bits of your life do you want to protect. And I think it's so important to lead by example because our kids don't leave our house remembering the lectures we gave them. They leave our house once they're old enough, you know, and it's true for me, it's probably true for you, but then when they begin their own home, the little habits they learned are the things that they carry forward. You know,
yeah,
whether it's, you know, grandma's pasta recipe that you taught them, or whether it's wearing slippers around your house if you're a slipper wearing family. If you are, you're probably going to do that. I mean, even to, this is true, this is an aside, but it's true, even to the toothpaste that you get your kids
okay,
there's studies on this, believe it or not, health studies on this, about the fact that the brand that you give your kids often ends up being the brand they have as adults. So
mm,
toothpaste companies have done a really smart thing, which is guide kids to stay with them forever. And it becomes a
yeah,
habit. You buy the same toothpaste. It doesn't matter what you get advertised. You're just going to buy the toothpaste
mm,
that the flavor reminds you of, this is what I brush my teeth with. Like, it's
mm,
quite
yeah,
fascinating. So for me, the habits that you embed with technology become the habits that your kids will live out in their everyday lives. So for me, it's about embedding good habits. And I agree with you. I don't think we have them innately. Probably because nobody taught us how to live with phones. I mean, my parents didn't have a smartphone. They didn't exist when I was a kid. They didn't exist when I was a teenager. So, you know, I think for me, one of the toughest parts of this is unlearning, a bit like you know, like,
Yeah.
I mean, that that thing you just said about the mark of your phone in your
Yeah.
pocket. What a visual. I mean, I feel like
Yeah.
so many people will connect with that. But that's a visual of our generation. And
Mm.
I feel like it would be really beautiful for me anyway, personally, if my daughters, you know, ever rewatch this video and were like, "Oh, we don't have that. That would
Mm.
never happen. I wouldn't carry my phone around my pocket all day." You know, like,
Yeah.
because there's so many things that have changed over time. You know, I use the analogy of seatbelts because to me it's something I lived through. I mean, my
Yeah.
dad still needs reminding. He hates wearing a seatbelt. He never had to wear one. He didn't
Yeah.
have to wear one when he got his driver's license. You know, they were not the thing. And, you know, I can't imagine my daughter ever getting in the car without putting on a seatbelt. And people would say, but it's the law. And I'm like, two things. It's two things. The law, for sure. That means there are seatbelts in the car. But I don't see like policemen on every street checking all the cars that you're wearing your seatbelt. The
Yeah.
thing that makes you wear your seatbelt is a habit because it
Mhm.
becomes automatic. You sit down, you put it on, you don't think about it. The taxi drivers don't say put on your seatbelt. You just do it. And my kids do it. Like
Mm.
straight away. The first thing they do when they sit down, my eldest straight away pulls it on. And
Yeah.
I think that's so different to my dad, where I still have to say to him, you need to wear your seatbelt.
Yeah.
And I think we could do something like that with our phones for sure. They've
Yeah.
trained us to treat them like they are, you know, little pets that like need care, that we need to stroke and check and are you okay and put in your pocket. But it's not true. They're
Yeah.
objects.
Yeah. And like, because I was born in the early 80s, so I remember not having to wear a seatbelt, and then suddenly it became the law, and that was what we had to do as kids, because before you could sit in the boot of your car
Yeah,
if you
I remember all
um,
of that too.
yeah. But the other thing is, as well as it being a habit, it's a social norm, right? Like it's
Yeah.
frowned upon if you get in a car and don't put your seatbelt on. Typically, someone in the car will say, you have to do that. And I think that would be a nice place to get to. And you kind of talk about this a lot in the smartphone solution about it's not just about the norms in your family, it's about working with your extended family or kind of family
Yes.
friends about creating these new norms around when we give our kids phones, how we use our phones. I love that expression, phubbing,
Yes.
phone snubbing. Is that right?
Yes.
Because I know how it winds me up so much if I'm trying to talk to someone and they're like, "Yeah, uh-huh," and they're half listening, but I know it's like you're
They're
not
not
listening to me.
present. No.
But I also know I do that with my boys and my wife. I might be in the middle of sending
Yeah.
a message, whatever. It might be important, but they don't know that. And they come, Daddy, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yep, okay, right. And I'm still carrying on with my message. Um, but wouldn't it be great to get to a place where the social norm is like, that is so frowned upon?
And
Like
I
getting
think
your
it
phone.
should be frowned
Yeah,
upon because you wouldn't do that to somebody. You know, I always think of the phone as a third person or like an extra person, right?
yeah,
But you wouldn't do that to like your sons, your wife, you know, if somebody else was there, you wouldn't just ignore them and talk to somebody
yeah,
else because somebody would be like, that's really rude. And
yeah,
for some reason, we think it's okay when our phone interrupts us. We prioritize our phone over the people that we're in connection with. And I
yeah.
think once you are aware of that, I like for me, it's all about awareness as a first
Mm,
starting point. I think once you're aware of phubbing and the fact that you do it, which I think can be really confronting for some people, because like
yeah.
it can really sting to recognize that actually some of the time when your child is asking for your presence, you're stuck inside your phone. And some
Mm,
people will say, but I'm doing something important. And I'm like, I'm sure that's true. I can say the same too.
yeah.
And your child is important too. So for
Mm,
me, protecting times and or spaces in your home where the phone does not enter is really powerful. Because
mm,
in those areas, your child and you can just be present. And I
Yeah.
think it shifts, for me, it shifts the atmosphere in your house. I've found it a lot more freeing not to have my phone on me.
Mm.
It's actually quite heavy.
Yeah.
But, when you no longer carry it, you're like, oh yeah, that's heavy. So while it's really heavy, when you let go at home, it's a bit like taking off your jacket. I feel like it's
Mm.
and I'm one of those people who, when it isn't working and my kids are, I like to get changed into lounge clothes or like my pajamas in the
Yeah.
evening. And I don't want to carry like a rucksack, which is what it feels like you're carrying your phone all the time. Actually, when you
Mm.
just leave it, you can just get on with it. And it is really freeing. And
Yeah.
then there can still be times and spaces. I'm like you, right? I work on social media, blah, blah, blah. I don't need to answer comments when they come in. Like, I don't
Yeah.
need to do that. Like, no one,
Yeah.
I'm not needed. It's not an
Mm.
urgency. It's okay. And if it's work, I know that they'll either WhatsApp or call me. So I can put it on sound
Hmm.
and that notification can ring. And I can know if I'm bathing the kids. It often happens, bath time. It'll ping and I'll be like, somebody's messaged me. But
Mm.
it's okay because if it was really urgent, they'd call me. No one's
Yeah.
calling. I'll just read it afterwards when they're both in bed. And I feel like it transforms your world a little bit. Like
Hmm.
it's transformed mine in the sense that I feel like I can be present when I need to be and I can enter the digital world because I do think of it as like going in a different room in my house.
Yeah.
I am now taking although my body doesn't move, my brain does. My brain
Mm.
enters the digital world, so I'm gone. It's like I've left the room.
Yeah.
So now I actually do leave the room because where our phone is allowed to be is in a different space from like our dining room and where the kids play and our kitchen. So if I need to, I will just get up and I'll say, oh, I need to do something. And I'll go off
Mm.
and I'll do it. A bit like going to the toilet. And then
Yeah.
I come back. And it's a
Yeah.
very different thing to having it stuck to my face.
Yeah. And also like you also talk about kind of verbalizing what you're doing or having those conversations where your child might go, Daddy, what are you doing on your phone right now? And it you might say, oh, I'm just replying to Uncle Neil. He's asking where we're meeting for lunch later, so I'm letting him know. And therefore you're letting your child know you're doing something constructive. Like sometimes I will find myself increasingly saying if one of my sons comes up to me and I say, oh, Eli, do you mind, give me 1 minute, I just need to reply to this message and then I'll give you my full attention, and then send the message off so I don't forget what I'm meant to be doing, put the phone away, and I'm like, right, what did you want to tell me? And like that is, I guess, putting a boundary around,
Yes.
you know. But it also, if I'm like randomly scrolling on Instagram, if I was to verbalize, oh, I'm just watching silly memes right now, like even to say that out loud seems like a waste of my life. So that getting in the habit of maybe verbalizing what you're doing can also just be, it increases your own awareness, right? Of what
Absolutely.
I'm doing right now important, or is there something better I could be spending my time on?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think it takes away the power as well, because
Mm.
often we're doing something really boring.
Yeah.
Right? Kids are like, are you playing a game? Like, no, I'm doing something really boring right
Yeah.
now.
Tax
I'm
return.
doing the shopping list or,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Oh, we've got toilet rolls. Stick that in, whatever. But when you do
Yeah.
it out loud, one, it tells people, right, the disconnect from the real world and the digital world kind of shrinks a little bit because you're connecting them, right? You're connecting
Mm.
the people who you are in relationship with whatever you're doing in this other space online.
Yeah.
So that's one. And two, you're teaching your kids what you might use your phone for, replying to a text message, doing a work thing, shopping, whatever. But you're teaching them the mundane of what this
Yeah.
magical box that we enter all the time is to
Yeah.
kids. The reason why kids want smartphones is because we have them. Kids want what we
Mm.
have. And it's also because often as adults, we put a lot of value on them. Like every time you're like, I'm doing something really important and you're on your
Mm.
smartphone, your kid is like, that thing is really important. I need one. Like,
Yeah.
of course they
Mm.
think that. It's the same as like, keys. I mean, your kids are much older now, but I've got a 2.5-year-old and a 7-year-old. And they both went through the phase, and loads of kids do, of wanting keys. Because
Mm.
they hear us like, where's my keys? Oh, I need my key. They hear the key
Yeah.
thing all the time. And they're like, oh my God, and they open doors. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, So my 2.5-year-old has a lanyard. I have a lanyard for my keys with like little keys, and she loves walking around acting like she's opening all the doors. And I'm like,
Yeah.
she's copying me.
Yeah.
It's super sweet. But then if they copy us with a smartphone, is that super sweet?
Mm.
Right? And so you need
Yeah.
to think they're doing the same thing. It's no different to
Yeah.
anything else that we do that our kids are like, I want to do that. So I think talking about it is really important. And I also think the third reason why it's really important is it opens up the dialogue about the digital world, and you're opening it. Like from the get-go, you are setting this kind of ethos in your family of, I talk about the things I do online.
Mm.
Because you do. If you're opening
Yeah.
it going, I'm texting Uncle Neil or whatever
Mm.
you're doing, you've started to do that. So the day your kids do have a phone, they're more likely to go, oh, wait, Daddy, I'm texting Lisa.
Yeah.
And you know what they're doing because they're
Mm.
like, oh, this is a thing we do. We talk about what we do online. It's not private or secret or, something that you keep to yourself. We
Yeah.
should be having more open dialogues about technology, about what we do online. We should be using it as a way to, teach our kids
Mm.
good things as well as bad things, like
Yeah.
talk to them about stuff.
Yeah.
I often share with my daughter if I receive a meme. I know you said about the meme,
Mm.
but they go around. I might share
Yeah.
them with my daughter and we'll have a
Yeah.
conversation about it, about what's good
Mm.
about it, what's better. Is it funny? Yes. Is it okay? Is it not okay? We do it
Yeah.
when there's photos. I think
Yeah.
parents might do that. Oh, look, I got a photo with your cousins on it. But I
Yeah.
tend to say, what do you think? And like she'll comment on the photo and I'll go, do you think somebody asked your cousins if that photo could be shared or not? And then we
Mm.
have a conversation about digital consent about it.
Yeah.
Often she'll say, I don't know. And I'm like, do you think they should have been asked? Maybe. Because who shared it? Was it their parent? No. Who was it? Their auntie. Okay. Do we think she asked? Probably not.
Mm.
How would you feel about that? I don't know, Mummy. Good. And I
Yeah.
often go, good. I
Yeah.
want you to not know. And I
Yeah.
just think about it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, because when you're older, you might be like, I don't want you sending that photo to this massive
Mm.
group of people. Digital consent is
Yeah.
something that none of us really have, I feel, like as adults.
No. And
And
it's
kids really need it. It is one of the biggest areas of anxiety in my work. Anxiety, conflict, distress
Mhm.
in like peer groups, teenage peer groups, is the videos and images that get taken without consent that then get shared in groups on social media. And like some kids are distraught, like,
Mm.
it can really affect a young person's mental health. And
Yeah.
to me, WhatsApp is also social media, but I think it's important to think about that as well.
Mm. Um, and this is the interesting thing. So, despite advocating certain boundaries around children having their own phones, you also argue it's really important that children have access to digital experiences. So, do you want to just expand on what might those? I mean, we talked about some of them, those
So
digital
I think through
experiences.
you is one
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
I think digital experiences through you are incredibly powerful. I think that's where loads of the skills building is. So
hmm
try that. Other digital experiences can be like typing
hmm
on a laptop. So my daughter has a laptop. It's not connected to Wi-Fi.
yeah,
It's not connected to anything. It's not real. It's like a toy laptop. But
yeah,
she's learning where the keys are
hmm
and she writes little electronic diaries. So it's like a diary. It's
yeah,
very cute. She doesn't do it all the time, but every now and again she'll put it in and she puts the date and then she writes something, and she does it
mm,
like this with like two fingers. But I think, I mean, it's like a little, I mean, I don't want to say the brand, but it's a toy,
yeah.
right?
Okay,
And it's a toy, and we got it in Spanish because we talk in Spanish to her because I wanted her to practice and learn and do all of that. But I also wanted her to learn about keyboards and writing and that kind of
mm,
stuff. I think that's a healthy digital experience for kids. And it's also about saying, like, kids get this at school.
yeah,
Like, my daughter talks about writing on a laptop or doing bits and bobs. So I think it's important, like, that we live in a digital world. We need to skill up our kids. That doesn't mean we give them a smartphone.
yeah,
That means we safely supervise and facilitate them experiencing the digital world with us. Things like researching holidays. We might get the family laptop. We've done this before. and we'll look at things together. So she sees us type things. That's learning. You know,
Mm.
she's learning like this is where we research this, this is what we look at, blah, blah, blah. We might talk about the adverts that show up when you look for holidays and we'll go, can you see all these little boxes? Yes. Do you know why we're not clicking on them? No. Let's have a conversation about why
Yeah.
we don't click on the adverts or
Yeah.
anything that pops up. You need to tell your kids, where are they
Yeah.
going to learn this if you don't teach them? They're going to
Mm.
learn through experience. And some of that experience might not be healthy or appropriate or so just teach them. I believe in teaching our kids about the digital world the same way we teach them about anything else in the world. You know, we even like crossing the road, you might teach them, you look left, you look right, you look at the lights, you look at the car. Why can't you teach them the same? You go online, this is where you search for things, but you need to be careful what you search. Look at all these boxes that pop up, we don't touch them. They might take you to a different page, it might be scary or it might be harmful, or it might be selling you something. You know, talk about it. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like people get confused that digital literacy means give your kids a tablet or, you
Mm.
know, give your kids a smartphone, otherwise they can't do it. And I don't think that's the case.
No.
I think teaching through you is the most powerful, and you can allow them to have these little digital experiences with you, supervising. I'm all about supervise your kids online the same way you would in the park. Like, I mean, that's my best analogy that I can think of because I wouldn't let my 7-year-old go alone to the park on her own for a couple of hours and then come home.
Yeah.
I would never do that. Never.
Mm.
So I'm not going to allow her to spend a couple of hours online, not knowing what digital playground she's in, who she's talking to, what she's seeing, what. I don't care that she's safely on the sofa. She might still be at risk.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to let her do that. If she goes on the tablet, she draws. She loves drawing. I always say my daughter's an artist. She loves drawing. We allow her to draw on the tablet, on like the paint app, the art app. It's totally safe. There's no pop-ups. There's no pay anything. And she's allowed to draw and she does it on the table, often next to me doing some work. So we're
Yeah.
both kind of working or writing. And to me, she could do it on paper and she does. But she can also do it on a tablet, and I'm okay with that. It doesn't,
Yeah.
you know, it doesn't bother me.
So your book is extremely practical. It's one of the reasons I really like it, especially as a parent navigating this kind of tricky terrain myself with my wife. Um, and so one of the things we're definitely going to do in our house is use your kind of family phone pledge. So could you just briefly summarize what that is, why you've designed it, and how it can help families?
So the family phone pledge is a promise that you make in your
Hmm.
home as adults and children to use technology in a way that fits for your family and protects your family as well. So it's about thinking about the spaces where technology is allowed and the kind of technology that you allow to be around in your home. So, you know, with my little ones, they're nowhere near a smartphone. So we include things like TV, for example,
Hmm.
like watching TV or using their tablet to draw, whatever that looks like. It's the when, the why, and the how of these things. You can also put in like your time limits, all that kind of stuff. And then the spaces where you're protecting time away from screens. In our house, it's meal times, bedrooms, which by the way, my 7-year-old said, I don't want you to come in my room with your phone. I mean, it's so telling.
Interesting. Yeah.
And when they're little, kind of, they don't have a playroom, but where they play, which is basically everywhere. But there's a space where, like, and if we enter that space, she's like, I don't want you to have your phone anywhere. And for me, it's a negotiation. So you can set it at any point because the whole point is that you review it over time. You check in with each other. How's it working? Who's slipped up a lot? Who's really struggling? Who's doing really well? How do we need to change this? Is it not really working for us? Because you might have an idealized view of what's going to work for you as a family, and then when you do it, you're like, this doesn't work. So that's okay. Like the whole point is it's a promise, and you can say we're working at this together. We're trying to figure it out. And you know, as my kids get older, my eldest might end up with a laptop for school or whatever it is when she's in secondary. If that's the case, she's not going to have it in her bedroom because that's a screen-free area. So I'm very clear about that. And some people might say I'm too strict, maybe, but she's not. She's not going to have a laptop in her room. She can use our family laptop, and we've got like an open desk in our house. She can sit there and we can be around to supervise, to hear, to ensure that she's using it for the right stuff, basically,
Yeah.
not just going online looking at anything. Because it's not just a smartphone you can do that on, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's an important thing to remember. Um, and as she gets older and she has a phone, that she like follows the things that we're doing. But the really beautiful thing I think with the Family Phone Pledge is that it's not just for you. It can be for visitors when they come in. You can say, well, we've made this family rule that we don't have phones at the table. So I'm very sorry. I know your phone's important, but when the meal is over, you can go and get it. We're just going to put it over there, plug it in. And then mealtime is for us. It's not for your phone, for example.
Yeah.
So, allowing family, friends to kind of see what it's like can be really powerful. And I know some parents who are like, oh my God, thank God. Like there's not screens everywhere. I'm like, no, they're
Yeah.
not. Like we've got a rule. So
Mm.
yeah, if it's time for TV, you can go and sit in the front room with TV, but you can't walk around with a tablet in my house as a kid.
Yeah.
Like we don't have that. My daughters can't do it, so other people who come in can't do it either. It's my space. And
Yeah.
again, it's about helping parents to feel confident that they can make these rules. The
Mm.
same way that you might say to somebody, you don't walk in with your wellies and like jump on my bed because it's my bed. Like
Yeah.
you're allowed to make that rule and nobody would say, oh no, that's outrageous. Why do we
Mm.
think it's outrageous when we're talking about tech? It
Mm.
should be the same. So I think it's really, I find it a very helpful thing to open up conversations with my kids, open up conversations with people who come into our house, and make us, the adults, accountable to our behavior with our technology, especially our phones. And I hope that what it does is embed healthy habits that my kids want to take on. This promise can be something you extend to like, I know you mentioned it before, but to like friends, people in your community. I'm really trying to extend this into the primary school my daughter goes in.
Okay.
I'm really trying to get the whole school to sign a school pledge on
Mm.
smartphones. That isn't just for the kids, but it's also the teachers because the teachers carry their phones and pick them up in class.
Yeah.
And I feel like we should be again embedding this kind of societal norm
Yeah.
about this is what's healthy, this is what's etiquette. Like there is no such thing as phone etiquette, and I feel like we should have it.
Mm. Yeah. I completely agree. And, I'd love to talk to you for hours about this topic because it's got so many more questions, but we'll leave it there. And one of the things I wanted to say, like why I found this book so helpful, is you comment quite early on that it's not helpful to think of phones as being addictive, that they are kind of strong habit forming kind of devices, and that we can change our habits with these small consistent steps. And so whether you are a parent like me with young kids that haven't quite got to the phone age, whether you are parents with kids that do have their phones, why I find this book really empowering is like you are in control, you can take control, and you can do so in small, consistent ways. Like it's not, you haven't let the rabbit out of the hat and that's it. You've got no control
Yeah.
as a parent, and that's why I find the book really useful. So thank you for writing it. Thank you for giving up your time to join me for this chat. Yeah, and you can buy your book in all good bookshops and online and everywhere else. So thank you, Dr. Marta.
My pleasure. Thank you.
They tell